So today's title of the message is Lay It on the Altar. And it's going to be in Genesis chapter 22, so you can turn there. Genesis chapter 22. So if you have your mobile device, you can pull it up there, or you have the good old-fashioned Bible with paper in it. Those do exist. Or we'll have it on screen. We have either of those. Genesis 22, I'm reading out of the ESV version. If some of you might have something different. So Genesis chapter 22, we're going to read verses 1 through 14. It says, "After these things God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here am I. He said, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains on which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took two of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him." Verse 4. "On the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together, and Isaac said to his father Abraham, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. He said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went both of them together." Verse 9. "When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, The Lord will provide. And it is said to this day, On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." Now, what a great story of epic faith, right? This very intense story where something, there's Isaac and he's about to get slaughtered and God intervenes. But a great story of faith on Abraham. But as we were kind of looking at who to talk about as we went through these stories, which is these men which are found, men and women I should say, that were found in Matthew chapter 1, which is kind of gives us a lineage from Abraham down to Jesus. We were trying to pick out per se people to talk about in the context of epic failure that was replaced by epic faith, which created an epic story. And Isaac popped out because it seems like this story is focused an awful lot on Abraham, right? It's like Abraham this, Abraham that, Abraham, right? So that's maybe what I would say if I was Isaac. Here we go again. It's all about Abraham. But rightly so, because even Hebrews names him as one of the great men of faith, and because he did. He stepped out, as we seen last week, in great faith based on something that seems so crazy. So rightly so. But my question this morning is what about Isaac? Isaac, the guy who's about to get killed, right? And the guy who's sitting, who's laying on the altar with a knife above him. What about that guy? Because if I was Isaac, I'd be like, excuse me, Excuse me, like, I'm in the story. Can somebody mention me? So I just don't know if Isaac gets enough credit. And I don't know that that's the Scripture's fault. Maybe it's our fault as you know, as we either read and skip over that, or as we teach it, that maybe we focus more on Abraham on this side and Jacob on this side. But I think as we look at this, and as you hone in, maybe magnify, get a little closer, we can see Isaac's epic faith. We can see Isaac's epic faith as we get a closer glimpse. Because see, the thing is, as we read this, you almost get this idea, or you might get this idea, that Isaac is oblivious to what's going on. Now, this story develops where God speaks to Abraham, and it's almost like, okay, Isaac's just tagging along. So he's just oblivious, like, me and Dad are just going for a ride out in town, right? Like, it's just a normal day. You might get that. You might get that idea. But I think Isaac knows. Okay? I think as this whole thing develops, I think Isaac, his gears are turning. And the reason, Isaac's been there with Abraham. Little kids pick up the routines of their parents. So every day, okay, well, Dad, he gets up in the morning and he goes, first thing, gets coffee, and then he goes, gets a shower, and he gets his clothes on, and then he eats, and then he goes. So routines, right? Or vice versa, however, whatever routine that you have, or the fact maybe that you don't have a routine, but kids pick up on these things. So they see these routines or rituals, whatever you want to call it. And I believe it's the same thing for Isaac as he watched Abraham. And I believe this is evident in verse 7 because Isaac takes a minute and he says to his father Abraham, my father. And if, I don't know if up there it shows it, but there's an exclamation point. So he's a little bit excited about this. And he says, my father, and Abraham says, here am I, my son. He tells him, behold the fire, behold the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? So I think this is a way of the narrator telling us that Isaac is getting a little suspicious. Isaac's getting a little suspicious. He's like, hey, Dad, I don't know if you realized, but we're kind of missing something. And it's not just any something. It's kind of like the most important thing. The sacrifice, isn't that what we're doing anyways? All right? And I picture Isaac maybe having a little internal dialogue, during this whole thing. He's like, man, Dad seems to be hugging me an awful lot. I know he loves me and all, but just lately, he's just hugging me all the time, tell me, hey, I love you. And, you get sad one minute, and happy and mad the next. He's going through all these mood swings, and I don't know. It's almost like if somebody's about to die. So you might could see this inner dialogue that Isaac's having. So I don't think he was oblivious. I think Isaac is putting these pieces together. I think he's kind of seeing, hey, we've got everything minus the sacrifice, and maybe it's me, I don't know. But here's the amazing thing. Isaac still goes. Isaac still goes. And not only does he go, but he submits to his father Abraham. Not only does he go, but he submits to his father Abraham. And the reason I say submit is because Isaac is probably in his late teens, early 20s, early mid-20s. So he's a man at this point. And Abraham, on the other hand, is on the side of, wow, you're really old. So like he's really old. Like he's not just old, but he's like, wow, you're really old. And Genesis 17 tells us this because when God is telling them about their son, he's like, how is it possible that a child shall be born to a man who is 100 years old? Notice, this is before Isaac's born. So he's already 100 years old before Isaac's even born. So think about it this way. This is how I think. So I'm just letting y'all into a little bit of my craziness. But just picture this. So in this corner, you've got a 5'10", 130 pound, 120-year-old Abraham. Give it up. Yeah. And then on this side, you've got a 5'11", 190 pound, 20-ish-year-old Isaac. And they're about to be in a cage fight. Okay? A cage fight. Now, my money's on Isaac. I'm just saying. Okay? My money's on Isaac. Isaac's winning. If it came to that, if they were about to duke it out, if they were about to fight, my money's on Isaac. So this is why I say that Isaac submitted. Because if we notice in the story, it says that Abraham bound him and put him on the altar. I'm just going to throw this out there, but if Isaac didn't want to be bound and thrown on the altar, he wouldn't have been thrown on the altar. Okay? So he submitted. He willingly submitted to his father to be placed on the altar. Now this is getting pretty good, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I might be reading into this a little bit, but this is my theory of why Isaac submitted. See, I believe that Isaac had been watching Abraham as Abraham followed God. Isaac is observing Abraham throughout his life. Remember, he's in his 20s or so. He's been watching Abraham. He's been observing how much Abraham cared about God, how Abraham cared about Abraham cared about what God thought. He cared about seeking God. He cared about obeying God. So he's been watching this. He's been watching. He's evidenced this. But not only that, Isaac has also been hearing about how important he is to God. Remember, he's a promised son. He's a promised child. Like, there's a lot that hinges on Isaac. If Isaac doesn't happen, then we're in trouble. And so he's been hearing these things. He's probably been in the middle of conversations between Abraham and Sarah talking about, man, I can't believe Isaac's here. Can you believe we had Isaac when we were so old? Can you believe that God fulfilled his promise? Can you believe that he's actually here? Can you believe that God is doing what he said we would do? That we didn't just come out here on some kind of aimless, crazy adventure? No, God has actually fulfilled it, and here he is. His name is Isaac. Isaac's been hearing this. He knows he's a pretty big deal in God's plans. So when Abraham comes up with this crazy idea, because again, I think Isaac's putting these together, right? So when Abraham comes up with this crazy idea, I believe that Isaac can only assume that his dad is following God. He can only assume that if what he is actually imagining, as crazy as it may sound, he can only assume that his dad is actually following God as he did before. So let me ask a side note here. Just kind of a side note. What does your family say when you get a crazy idea? Do they have something to fall back on? Like when you come up with this crazy idea, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to be so generous that it's scary. Like, we're going to give away and sell so much stuff that the kids are going to get scared. They're going to be like, are we moving? And when you come up with this, they're going to go, oh, okay, well, I can only assume that it's God. I can only assume that mom and dad are trying to be obedient to God because they did it. I can only assume that my brother or my sister or my daughter or my cousin or my friend or whoever is just being obedient in what God has done, because I've seen it in the past. I've seen how they've been obedient. I've seen how they've followed God, and they have something to follow. Side note, how would your family react? How would those around you react? That one's free. I'm not going to charge, but that was a good one. Yeah. But I believe Isaac, after watching, hearing, and experiencing his father's God, God became his God. his father's God became his God. I hope that doesn't put a lot of pressure on you, but I hope it does put a lot of pressure on you. Because there's people watching this, and they're watching, if we're proclaiming to be the children of God, then they're looking at our God. And if they see that our God is worth following, then maybe they will follow our God. They'll make our God their God. So I believe that Isaac, after watching, hearing, experiencing, he took on God as his God. And so he trusted and submitted what had become his God. That's what I believe happened. So my subpoint, or my subtitle, is this, that if you lay it on the altar will alter your life. That if you lay it on the altar will alter your life. See, Isaac trusted God enough to allow himself to become a guinea pig in someone else's faith story. Anybody signing up for that? Like, it's not your faith story, it's somebody else's faith story. You know, it's like God's not testing your faith, directly. He's testing somebody else's, but you're the one that's going to get killed, right? It's like, there's one thing, like, to trust God enough to kill, Evan over here. Yeah, sure, God, I trust you, right? Like, I'm not losing, my life. And for Evan to be willing to be that guinea pig. See, that's what Isaac did. He trusted God enough to become the guinea pig in someone else's faith story. How big is your faith this morning? Is it that big? There you go. I like that. So by this, Abraham, by Isaac, the one who doesn't really get mentioned in this, by this, Abraham became the father of many nations, and Isaac became the very first descendant in that lineage. Man, what a great story of faith. What a great story of faith. That Abraham, that God fulfilled what he said he would do, and Isaac was part of that, a huge integral part of that. But sadly, there's more. So if you remember, Scott, if y'all can put the cover back on. It says epic, and you'll see failure and faith. See, in a lot of these stories, we'll see where failures, because of their faith, had epic stories. But I think the reverse is also applicable, where they can start out with epic faith, but somehow they forget about that and end up in epic failure. And sadly, that's what we'll see in Isaac's life. And so the next subtitle that I will put on this is that if you don't use it, you lose it. And the story begins in Genesis 25. And God comes to Isaac now. Abraham's passed. And the Lord said to Isaac's wife, he said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. See, now we are jumping into the story of Esau and Jacob, Isaac's sons. And the caution of this story comes at the point that God presents to him this divide. That God explains to him how he wants it to happen. See, I believe that Isaac's faith had become lukewarm or lazy. See, again, if you don't use it, you lose it. Faith is active. Faith is an active thing. Did you know your faith can become lazy? Anybody ever thought about that? Your faith can become lazy. See, you have to exercise your faith. You have to exercise your faith. See, Isaac stopped walking by faith and started walking by sight. He stopped exercising his faith and started exercising his own judgment. He stopped walking by faith and started walking by sight. See, See, God let him know which one of Isaac, which one of his sons would become the recipient of his promises. It was going to be Jacob, not Esau. God had chose Jacob, not Esau. He told Isaac, look, Isaac, your son Jacob is the one who will be the one who I'm giving my promise to. Not Esau. Esau's actually going to serve Jacob. I know Esau's the older one. I get it. I see what you're saying. But it's not Esau. Esau's going to serve Jacob. But Isaac could see past that. See, it was a custom that the oldest son inherited everything. That's how it was meant to be. That's how they were raised, and they knew this. And so when God's telling them this, he just can't get his head around it. Like, but God, that's not how we've done it. This is how we've done things. This is how it's supposed to be. This is how it makes sense to me. The older inheritance thing, I don't get it. I can't grasp that. And Isaac couldn't also not just see past that, but he couldn't see past the physical. See, as you study about these two guys, Esau's kind of like the man's man, right? He's a hunter, and it says like he's like super hairy, and he's just rugged, like he's like a Rambo or something. I don't know. You know, it's just a very tough hunting, whatever else you want, whatever looks rugged to you. That's the guy. And then you have Jacob, who's kind of the homebody, stay at home, stay with mom all the time, mama's boy, cooking. Right? The two very extreme personalities. And so Isaac can't see the past the physical, because he's like, Esau, he's a warrior. Like, if you give it to him, he's going to make it happen. You know, he can hunt, he can do all these things. Are you serious that you're going to give it to the cook? You know? What's he going to do? Hit him with a frying pan? Like, he can't see past the physical. So maybe this is you today. You know, just Isaac, he didn't have a problem laying down his life. Remember Isaac, he was courageously full of faith, laid himself down, laid his life down on the altar to be sacrificed. Not an easy thing. But then he couldn't trust God to fulfill his promises through a cook. It's kind of ironic. Kind of crazy. But maybe you trusted God for salvation. Maybe you, at some point, trusted God to get you from this world to the next world. Maybe you put your eternal salvation in God. Maybe you are trusting in somebody you've never seen to meet you on the other side, to bring you into paradise. Maybe you are trusting in something that you can't touch for your eternal salvation. But you can't trust him on some kind of decision that doesn't make sense. Huh? Right? Is that possible? Does that make sense? Like, you trust God for your eternal salvation, but you can't trust him to, God, I can't tithe this $30 because I don't know how I'm going to make it. And God, I can't choose a job based on what's best for you and your kingdom because I just don't know that I can do that. God, I don't know if I can break off this relationship because I feel like I can't do without that other person. And on and on and on we put these decisions, and we trust God for the eternal, but we can't trust God for the temporal. See, an epic story requires epic faith. Maybe today you need to bring your doubts and lay them down at the altar. And I don't know what anybody's going through. I don't know what kind of decisions you have to make. I don't know what kind of faith steps you have to take. But to be in an epic story, you have to have that in an epic God. That's the key. Maybe today you need to bring your doubts and lay them down on the altar. And let me tell you something. Maybe we've bought into this thing as Christians that we're not allowed to doubt. Like, we're not allowed to have a bad day. Like, we're not allowed to fear. Like, we're not allowed to fail. But let me tell you that God's not afraid of your doubts. God's not scared that you're just not sure some days that God exists. He's not scared about that. He's not scared that you're struggling with this, but He's there patiently waiting on you. And maybe today you need to bring them and lay them on the altar. And as you wrestle with that, because I feel like, I would say all of us have to wrestle with that. I feel like all of us have to wrestle with this thought, this doubt, this thing that we're not laying down. So as you wrestle with that, I want to continue, but I want to tell you about, I don't want to stop with Isaac. I don't want to stop with Isaac. I want you to see that there's a big narrative behind this story. There's something so beautiful that the story of Isaac is showing us. See, the whole setup of Isaac's story looks a lot like another story in the Bible. Play some background music, that works. There's this whole setup looks like another story in the Bible. See, there's another promised son. There's another, remember, Isaac was a promised son, but there's another promised son. And it was said of him that he would take away the sins of the world. And see, this promised son too, he went up on a hill also. He went up on a hill called Calvary. He too willingly laid down his life. He too went on a 3-day journey. Jesus too saw the wood on which he would die. He saw the fire of God's holy wrath. And he knew that he would be the sacrifice. See, Jesus is the true Isaac who faithfully laid down his life for us in obedience to the Father. And God is the true Abraham who willingly gave up his son. Jesus submitted fully until death, and then powerfully rose from the grave. But here's the beautiful part. That unlike Isaac, he doesn't look at the outer appearance. So he doesn't look at all your failures. He doesn't look at all your past. He doesn't look at, all your weaknesses. He doesn't look at all the things that you say disqualify you. He doesn't look at that. He actually says that he's going to take the weak and shame the strong. He takes unlike Isaac, he looks past the physical and he says, I can use you. If anything, the weaker you are, the better, because I shine more the weaker you are. So Jesus looks past that, unlike Isaac. And so we can trust that the true Isaac, that Jesus can handle your doubts and fears. Bring them. Every single one of them. I don't care what it is. Bring your doubts. Bring your fears. Lay them at the altar. Bring those things that hold you back. And know that when you lay it all down, you're in good hands. When you bring your doubts and your fears and those hang-ups and whatever it is that's holding you back, you're in good hands.